Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling Second Amendment Fetishism slash Extremism is quote unquote constitutional dress up for lawlessness and fascist thuggery. So, I'm kind of reflecting on in this episode on a couple of different events. Obviously, the events in Tennessee, which I've already discussed in a previous video, and just some comments that were made in interviews that I listened to about the history of the Second Amendment and or of recent court decisions. And it's more a kind of this episode is sort of like, why didn't I see this before, or why don't other people see with what I think is the same clarity with which I'm seeing it now, in terms of the relationship of the Second Amendment and its misinterpretation and the whole body of law that we have in the United States and law enforcement in the United States. So both the laws and also their enforcement. So my thesis here, and I'm not a lawyer or a constitutional lawyer, but I've had to, as a citizen, as a concerned citizen here in the United States, I've come to, study some of it. I'm not a law nerd by any stretch of the imagination, um, but it's sort of thumpingly. What I'm saying is thumpingly obvious. One needn't have be armed with a bunch of case law to be able to discuss this matter, and it's been shrouded in, I think, a dress up, what I'm calling dress up, or a veil of respectability, where by referring to the Constitution. So basically, what's happened is that the Second Amendment has been gutted of any regulatory framework that it might contain, with the whole militia idea essentially being a well-regulated militia idea being read out of it by the right-wing courts over the last couple decades, and so and they've stymied attempts by, in the most famous decision, which is, or the most consequential, DC versus Heller in 2008. But anyway, there's just been a trend by judges, by the Supreme Court and other judges, to weaken gun regulation and to heap rights upon the gun holder, or the and I'm saying diminish rights, or for people who don't carry guns, and who and this is becoming very obvious when people are now afraid to go out and be randomly killed by gun toters and gun owners, whether they're legally owned or not, and those people can get away with murder, and they see little consequence for their actions because of in some states more than others. So in obviously in certain states it's more regulated than others, but still we have a majority on the Supreme Court that is supported by that's a right-wing majority that is buttressing and building up essentially this informal militia, so to speak, the stochastic militia, the stochastic terrorist grouping that is dispersed through society, and they could potentially rule in a federal way to further gut states' efforts to regulate guns, but also it does, because our states there's no border checks at states. There's free travel between states in the United States. So basically, state by state regulation is much less effective than a national regulation of guns. So, anyway, so the Second Amendment is this, you could say, knife in the heart of any law or law-based order, any rule of any idea that the Constitution represents a secure guarantee for rights, especially the right to life. Okay, liberty and the life and liberty, basically any rights for anybody who doesn't hold a gun. So this the creation of this stochastic militia that is, essentially that's dispersed around the United States is a problem of sovereignty and governability for the United States. We don't have a governable society if we have a Second Amendment as interpreted by these rogue justices. Okay, they are dressed in robes, and they were appointed by presidents of the United States in various, almost all by Republicans. In fact, all of the justices that are ruling in favor of these measures, or if not all, most of them are appointed by Republicans. So, but anyway, so and the majority, at least the if you poll the United States, certainly Republicans are not a majority of, certainly the core of the Republican Party is not the majority of the population, though sometimes they will win the national election by, winning the Electoral College in our antiquated system, and also by having the filibuster and so forth and so on. They can, and their strength in the Senate, due to how rural states and small states tend to have a disproportionate power in the Senate. Anyway, so we have a system that favors Republicans and favors the right-wing and now increasingly fascistic elements that are located in some of those areas. Not necessarily a majority, and not necessarily everybody in those areas are this type of person, but we have a pall of terror and of what I'm calling fascist thuggery, lawlessness, that is undergirded by the misinterpretation, the severing of the Second Amendment in two, and the basically using only the latter part of it as the operative part of the law. And so it's a poorly written amendment. It's not measured to our times, and in terms of, we don't really operate. The idea of a militia is something that is an outdated concept in a country that has a standing military and a national guard and so forth and so on, where the management of weapons is regulated by the command of those units and so forth and so on. So deadly force, people are accumulating deadly force in according to their desires and wishes and their own aggressivity in terms of, or their own paranoia, and this is leading to a people, for instance, this old man who severely wounded a young black guy in a high school student in Kansas City, Missouri. This is leading to this kind of random but still paranoia. Seems to be a paranoia-induced, or a probably media-induced act of aggression, and a sense of basically a delusion on the part of this old man that this young boy was a danger to him. And so, and also there's just the idea that he was entitled to visit deadly force on this person in an area of uncertainty when he had rung his doorbell and he mistakenly thought it was a house that he was supposed to pick up his sibling from. So anyway, so we have the situation, and we have media outlets like Fox News that are conditioning these people to feel entitled to this, you know, deadly having the means to easily hurt and kill other people, and then also the idea that there are the people of other races or people who are black and brown and so forth and so on are threatening and are not to be trusted in any way, and therefore and also deserving of even being aggressed upon and having deadly force visited on them. So, and this is unfortunately something that even penetrates this. There's this attitude of that you saw in the Trump White House and in that administration, and then you also see that culture mimicked in the police forces of that law is not something that is written down and that you subscribe to, but rather it's simply a matter of force that you visit on someone else. So you just accumulate force and you use force upon other people and you force them to do things, and that's essentially what they consider to be law. And so you gather, in this case, Donald Trump strategically gathered together his militia, so to speak, of stochastic terrorists, people who are inclined to use guns and so forth and so on. He courted them, and he uses it to magnify his sense of personal threat and personal power. And so he understood more than some other people, including some people in the media, he understood that language of power involving this sort of display of threat, this bravado that, you know, has been an American tradition in certain ways and was regimented in certain ways in the pursuit of imperialist adventures and in terms of shows of military force. It's been mobilized in different ways, mostly abroad, but now the chickens are coming home to roost, or, I mean, not just now, but they've been roosting on and off throughout our history. But anyway, basically we have a conflict between a party that is turning toward fascism, and fascism is about a certain kind of lawlessness that's in a hierarchical grouping that of people who already have benefited, who have benefited from the current system and are using it to undermine democracy and to dismiss democracy and dismiss process and rule of law and discussion, and instead wanting just brute force to be the of whatever description. So it could be brute force, physical, having powerful people who are strong and so forth and so on, who are buff and whatever, but also not restricted to that, obviously, to having arms of any kind, to being just dangerous, to being physically physically threatening to other people. And this is also appealing to members of law enforcement and the military and so forth and so on. So it's part of their culture. So the law part of the legal part of being a law enforcement officer or being in the military and so forth and so on is being subtly undermined by this cultural appeal to this brute force, you could call it sadistic, imposition of power. And so, and anyway, but the whole misinterpretation of the Second Amendment and gun rights is about this grabbing of power, this attraction to anything that symbolizes power that you can exert on other people. And so the gun seems like this compelling symbol of this personal power of death over other people, and ability to be deadly, and to accumulate that power in a minority of people. And so that minority, even though there are casual references to everybody sort of becoming armed, and everybody having this gun, this sort of a utopia of gun toters, it's always going to be, the market is always going to be concentrated among the paranoid and among the right-wing people who tend toward paranoia, or toward this view of the world where it's dog eat dog, and you want to be the top dog, and you want to have a gun to impose your will on other people, without reference to any laws, without any legal system to refer to. So anyway, so I am raising this kind of, even though I'm not a lawyer and I don't get involved in the minutia of interpreting the law so much, it seems to me I'm viewing the forest rather than just the trees, in seeing that excuse me, in seeing that that there's been a lot of obfuscation about what's going on with the Second Amendment, and that really there needs to be a fundamental reform of our gun laws, including the Second Amendment, including putting another, even though it's very difficult to get another amendment in the Constitution to amend it, still it's a huge portion, a huge majority of Americans want reform of how we deal with guns. It doesn't mean banning guns, but it means regulating their possession in a way that makes it safe for other people, and means that there are consequences for people for misusing their weapons, and that they need to think long and hard before using a weapon, and before and we see the culture where this has been there's a permissive culture for excusing this kind of violence that we've seen, for instance, in Kansas City, Missouri. Anyway, I just wanted to air these views here, and I'm quite sure some of you have been thinking about the events of the last few weeks, but also just the last few years, and the mass shootings and so forth and so on. And many of you are probably getting tired of that too. So and anyway, so the respectability, we need to dismantle the respectable garb that supposedly gun rights advocates have, and then show that yes, we're for responsible gun ownership, but we need to define that, and we need to define that in the Constitution. And the current setup is where it's been whittled down to almost nothing in terms of regulation. That needs to be changed radically. In any case, please share your thoughts in the comments below, and also please like the video if you appreciated it in any way. Also, please subscribe to Politics 2100, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.